Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Found Family. I'm really excited. I have another special guest with me here today, Laurie, and we are going to be talking about understanding narcissistic personalities. Laurie is a former federal probation officer with a master in justice, a degree in cultural anthropology, and she's also a certified life coach. She is originally from California, but has been an expat for 14 years. Through her work, she shows you how you are your first home through her higher self letter writing technique and customized guided visualizations and affirmations. So beautiful. Hi, Laurie, and welcome to Found Family.
Hey, Lucy, thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Of course, I am really excited too. And I know that you and I have been chatting offline about narcissism, and we have a lot to share. So I am excited to, chat with you about this topic, especially during the month of May, as this is Mental Health Awareness Month. I think it's a very important topic to offer, people support through navigating this topic and identifying who in their lives might be narcissists.
Yeah, and I love how you said that, identifying in your life who might be a narcissist, because oftentimes we do have these people in our life and we don't know it. We're not really aware of, oh my gosh, my mother, my father, my sister, or my husband or spouse is a narcissist, because we're just living with them day in and day out and we've become accustomed to their behavior and we're not really thinking, are they high functioning? Are they not? Are they dysfunctional? Are they toxic? So I love that you said that. It's very important.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And so to kick us off, the question is, what is a narcissist?
Yeah, it is. It is the starting point, isn't it? When I was a federal probation officer, I remember I was given it was the DSM-4 then, now it's the DSM-5, which is how psychiatrists and psychologists diagnose narcissists and other cluster A, B, and C personality disorders. And I remember reading through these 5 bullet points that a narcissist had to basically qualify for. And I was like, whoa, this sounds oddly familiar. So
Yep.
yeah, I think where I'd like to start in answering that question is to identify that there are different types of narcissists.
Mm,
When we think of the narcissist, we think of the grandiose narcissist, the person who's like, me, look at me. But there are different types of narcissists, like the covert narcissist or the introverted narcissist, as well as the noble narcissist. That narcissist looks like they're doing really wonderful things in the world, really philanthropic, but really it's got an ulterior motive or an agenda laced with it.
mm,
So a narcissist is somebody who operates from this space of always having an ulterior motive or an agenda. They are not somebody who's generating their own supply or their own sense of identity from within themselves. They
mm,
are really looking for other people in their life that they can generate this supply from, that they can control, that they can possess. And they have a script in their mind of what life is supposed to look like and what relationships are supposed to look like. If it doesn't follow that script, then they have all kinds of behaviors and all kinds of ways that they try to pull you and lure you back in to make sure that that script comes true. So a narcissist is somebody who doesn't generally speaking, have empathy. They're somebody who is so focused on themselves and making sure that their needs and their desires are met, usually based on control, wanting a lot of control,
mm.
and therefore stealing or draining you of your energy and sometimes even obviously your identity.
Wow. Beautifully worded and said. And what an incredibly powerful visual to use, like script writing and energy extraction. I was following along mentally with these pictures in my head
Mhm.
because it was such a great way to describe it. And that is, it's again, as you said, it's like understanding the differences. And as I'm, hearing like what you're saying, I'm even thinking about, I'm like, okay, so what cluster, or like where, where does my mom sort of fall under that? But I think that, the most important step towards all of this is, as you just said too, is just like understanding the definition first. So that is like a really great starting point. And I think that a lot of questions that people might be having as they also sat there listening to you describing this and thinking about people in their lives and like, where does this person fit under this? What are some of the signs that we can
Yeah.
see out there?
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to clarify that there is narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, which is a mental condition. And then we have people with narcissistic traits. And generally speaking, when we're little kids, we are supposed to sort of have these narcissistic traits, right? We need to learn them in order for us to survive. We
Mm.
need to learn from our mom and dads that we're sort of the center of attention, so that way we don't put our hand on the stove and that sort of thing. What happens with a narcissist or any of the other cluster personalities is that they don't emotionally mature. So generally speaking, we have this phase in our life, right, where mom and dad's looking at us and they're grooming us and they're training us so that way we can hopefully get out into the world and we can survive and we can thrive. But what happens with these other personality disorders and the NPD, the person with narcissism, they somehow don't grow out or phase out of that. Now, there's always that question of that nurture side of things, or is it something that is inherited? I do think personally it is both. If you've got disorders already in the family, then there's a chance that that's going to happen already. But then, of course, how the child is reared. So what you will see, generally speaking, let's look at the covert narcissist, just for something that's a little bit different than the grandiose narcissist, because
Mm.
we're very familiar with the grandiose. But the covert, that narcissist shows up in kind of playing the victim a lot. They're playing on your pity. So they might be a bit more introverted. They might be a bit more shy. They tend to come off very intellectual, but oftentimes they're not as intellectual or as smart as we actually think they are, because they're presenting this image that they know a lot. Sometimes it's because they don't say so much, but then when they do say something, it sounds kind of quippy, sounds kind of witty, sounds
Mm.
very interesting. But what happens with that covert is, over time, as somebody's living with that covert, they start to sabotage holidays. Oh, I don't have time or energy for holidays. I'm just not interested. I don't want people to come in my home. I don't want to see this. I don't want, I'm burnt out. That might be us. Those are a sign of behaviors and symptoms that happens with the covert. The other thing is, they might tell you they don't want to go outside. They're just really not interested in being out in the world. They'd rather stay home. They want to read all day long. And what's wrong with you? Why do you always want to go outside? Why don't you just stay in here with me? So
Mm.
these might, again, be some sort of symptoms and signs and behaviors. If you're in a relationship with a covert, very early on, if you were intimate with them, they might be intimate frequently with you, and then suddenly it's dry. There's nothing, and there's no compliments to you.
Mm.
They start to slowly, not like a grandiose narcissist, but they will start to try to diminish your self-esteem with just little kind of, just like they'll just kind of peg you, and you don't really feel it straight away. It's as time goes on that you start to go, what's wrong with me? How come I don't feel so well? So another symptom is actually you. What's going on with you? Is your hair falling out perhaps? Or are you feeling like you want to sleep all the time? I had a client recently who was in a relationship with a covert narcissist,
Mm.
and all of a sudden she was saying, Laurie, I don't know what's going on with me, but I just want to sleep until noon. I don't have any energy. And she's a high energy person. And those can be the signs already straight away that you're possibly in a relationship with a covert.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't know too much about covert narcissism until I posted something on TikTok actually about narcissism, and someone commented and said, if someone is not the grandiose like type of narcissist, but they still have all these other things and they still do the guilt tripping and the blaming and the,
Yeah.
manipulation, like what would you call that person? And so I did a lot of research, and there was some
Mm.
articles that I found on Psychology Today, and that was sort of the first time that I heard that word covert.
Mm.
So it's interesting, as you said, that they play the victim, like that victim card.
Yeah.
And then the other thing
Yeah.
that came to mind too is, um, I love how you said that, unfortunately, when we do have those jabs, it's like that expression, death by a thousand cuts, where it's like, little paper cuts here and there, like it kind of hurts in the moment, but you might not understand, like, well, what gave me this paper cut? Or when you find a bruise and you're like, where did I bang my arm against? Like what? But internally, literally and figuratively, you're like hurting inside. So that's kind of
Yeah.
the visual that came to mind when you said that. And it's remarkable how narcissists have that way of like infiltrating your brain. And I
Yeah.
think that was something that I started subconsciously realizing. And as a very highly sensitive person and as an empath, I
Yeah.
always had these inklings, the signs that I was experiencing from a personal standpoint living with a narcissist is Why don't I trust myself? Why do I second guess
Mm,
all of my decisions? Why do
yes.
I feel really badly about something? Why do I constantly feel guilty, feel remorse? That those were my signs of,
Yeah.
the psychological damage, like all of the mental
Yeah.
abuse, because
Mm,
and I didn't realize, again, as we talked about, like, that it even was, because you think, like, if you're blamed for something, even if it's something small, it's like, well, maybe I deserved it. Maybe I actually did something that deserved a slap on the hand. So you start to get
yeah.
accustomed to getting that kind of verbal abuse. And, you know, the victim card is like the easiest trap for us, the victims, to feel like, well, maybe I made that person feel that way. And so it's this constant, you know, feeling of like, well, I should be taking the blame. Like, maybe this is me, maybe this is me. So
And that's what they want you to do. You
absolutely.
nailed it. There's that, all that blame shifting and all that word salad. So this is something that would happen in my home, is just like, I would go through what you went through. Like, okay, a goal was set here. I want you to do, Laurie, ABC. And then I would go, I'm even going to do D. Then I really am safeguarded. Yeah, you're feeling me off.
Oh, yep.
Oh, so then I do A through D. And then I'd go back and I'm like, I did A through D. And then goal increased. It's like, well, you didn't do E. Oh, wait a minute, there wasn't even a D. And now there's an E. So this is very classic narcissistic, increasing the goal on that HSP or on that empath, and then that empath going and doing it again, and then being in that perpetual hamster, wheel. And what the narcissist then is doing is, yep, I'm in her craw. I've baited her. I've hooked her in. I know that I'm in control. She actually may not realize that I'm in control, but she might, but it doesn't matter. I've got control. I've got possession. The other thing with them too is they enmesh themselves in you. So you know how you were kind of saying it, like, feels like they're in my soul. That's exactly what happens. You start to lose your identity. You're not aware of where they end and where you begin. And in my house, I always felt like with my dad that I was more his girlfriend than his daughter. It was a really strange thing. I don't remember being touched at all or anything like that, but there was just such strong enmeshment, no privacy, always overlooking my shoulder, getting on the phone. We had landlines back then when I was a teenager. So getting on the phone and listening in, and I'd be like, we hear you breathing. And then he would just close the phone, like, no big deal, like, whatever. It's like, what is this? Yeah. So very strong enmeshing could be another sign that your listeners also might experience and not even be aware of. It's actually a term to tune into to find out more about enmeshment. Emotional incest is another word that is often used with
Mm.
enmeshment. Yeah. And that's where you have this strange sensation that there are just a lot of boundaries that are super blurred, like, especially when it comes to your privacy, when it comes to your intimacy, when it comes to your vulnerability. Another way that the emotional incest might happen is, them walking around naked, or, they're wearing their bathrobe, but you see their bits underneath because they don't, try to cover it from you. And you're a little kid going, something doesn't feel right here. So those sorts of things might be things that your listeners want to look out for. The other signs and symptoms are always that guilting. You talked about that. It's like, if you're in a relationship where there's this undercurrent of
Mhm.
strong guilt, and you're perpetually feeling guilty, shameful, worried about what they're going to say, or shall I say this a different way? You're walking on eggshells, you're tiptoeing, you're tap dancing around subjects and not addressing the elephant in the room. You're probably living with someone who's disordered. It could be borderline, it could be histrionic, it could be narcissism, but that's probably what's going on there.
Absolutely. And the lack of self-identity, that right there strikes such a chord in me, because, like, it really resonates with me, because when you said about how the lines are blurred, that was definitely another sign, is that I could not distinguish anymore what was my mom's voice and what was my voice. Because
Mm,
every time I would try to do something or say something, like, to the point where I wasn't even allowed to feel my feelings. If I would tell
yeah.
her, I feel sad about
Mm,
this, no, 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 you think you feel sad. What you actually feel is this. And
oh
I
yeah.
have not the best memory, but I was definitely, that was sort of taken and used against me, because a lot of the
Yes.
times, if I didn't remember something, or if I thought I remembered something but there were gaps, every time that I would try to find comfort and support, confiding in my mom, she would like rewrite the story according to
Yeah.
how either she remembered it or how she wanted me to know the story. And that was really difficult because then it made me guess myself even more. And it, you know, like, and so I actually formed, I had very high levels of anxiety. And my therapist told me that I suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder because that was
Mhm.
a way for me to try to manage my anxiety. And I never like pieced
Yeah.
it together in
Yeah.
that way. But because of this lack of internal control, because of her need for control, as you talked about earlier, you know, that was another sign. And I would say that also something that came to mind was, um, you know, the constant need of feeling to, um, like, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like, if I would say, for example, oh, I saw you like going through my diary, and she'd be like, no, I didn't. Oh,
No, I
defensive,
didn't.
like, you know, like
Yeah.
defensive and constantly feeling like they need to like be on guard, you know, like
Yeah.
she was always feeling like if I would confront her about something, the
Yeah.
victim
Yeah.
card 100% was played. But she used to go through my journals, she used to go through my desk, and then she would play this, you know, well, I was just trying to clear it out for you. I was just trying to do you a
Yeah.
favor. You know, here I
Yeah.
am doing something for you, and you're so ungrateful. How can you not see that I'm trying to do this for you? It was this
Yeah.
constant, like, and those, again, were signs, like, I knew internally that something felt off, but I didn't understand why I was feeling this way or why, you know,
Yeah.
like, but I
Yeah.
felt it in my soul. Like, it was just this
Yes.
discomfort that I felt like I could never talk to her about it either, you know? So,
Yeah. You said something really important about not remembering. I
mm,
don't, and you said it like, I don't have that good of a memory anyway. And here's what I feel is happens from that, because I needed to wake up to this. And this, I started to wake up to probably 4 or 5 years ago when I met my husband. One of the things that happens when you're with a disordered parent, whether it's NPD or it's bipolar or it's a borderline, is like selective amnesia or victim amnesia. And
mm,
it's through the cognitive dissonance that they bring in. So someone who is disordered will do this of like, I hate you. Wait, don't leave me. Or no, I don't love you. No, you're amazing. So you've got two completely opposite different feelings, different vibes, different statements being told. And you're like, oh my God, which one is true? And when
wow.
that's happening over and over and over again, and then they're coupling that with stonewalling you, the silent treatment, as well as that famous statement, I never said that. I never said that, or I didn't do that, even though you saw them with your own eyes. Then the intention is to dizzy and spin you and confuse you and to hopefully get you to forget, to pretend like it never even happened, when the truth is it did. One of the things that happened for me, I suppose, was maybe one of my saving graces, and maybe this also happened with you and probably a lot of your listeners, is I journaled. I journaled since I was 9. But here's what's really funny is my father gave me the journal.
That's
And then
interesting.
later on, who was reading the journal? My whole
Oh, so
family was reading
you
the
too.
journal. Yeah. As you just said, with your mom and your mom pretending like, I didn't do that. And
Mhm.
here's the difference. So your mom sounds a little bit more overt, but I also had covert going on in my house. So the covert is sneaky and the covert's so subtle and the covert's not obvious. And because they can be pretty smart and introverted, you don't really question their behavior, especially if you have an overt in the house at the same time, because the overt's so loud and so big with their energy and taking up all this space that the
Mhm.
energy doesn't go to the covert. So the covert plays on that and covert uses that to their advantage. So I had both energies going on in my
Wow.
house. And I kept writing though, and writing was my saving grace because I would see the patterns, I would see the themes. And I woke up one day, years and years after journaling, and reading, wait a minute, everything is about your family. Everything is
Mm.
about relationships. And there are themes here. And I need you to look at this, Laurie, right? And it was because of this selective and victim sort of amnesia and the I never said that I, like you, would question it and say, well, geez, I'm crazy. This can't be right. And I can't question my family. I can't question my parents. But, I didn't have a great experience with therapy in the beginning because therapists didn't diagnose any issues. It was just me sort of talking ad nauseum and getting nowhere. But I was always the one going to therapy, always the one willing to find out, to seek, to discover and explore, and
Mm.
wondering, it must be me. Like, what's going on with the rest of them? They're not going, they're not seeking help still to this
Mhm.
day, and they won't. And
Yep.
it wasn't actually, believe it or not, until this January, after what, 20, more than 20 years of therapy, that I had a therapist here in the Netherlands who officially diagnosed me with PTSD. And
Wow.
I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God. Like, I really actually felt very liberated. I really felt liberated. And he also said, you have trauma. You had abuse in the home. And the thing is, I would never use that word abuse. And I don't know if you experience that as well, but I was like, I had two parents in the home. You know, I went to Catholic school, and people think that you have to have physical abuse, but mental, emotional, spiritual, psychological abuse, all of this also does count. Verbal abuse, it all counts. Even if there is just some instances of having been heavily spanked, that also does count as
Mhm.
physical abuse. But we as children, especially empaths, especially HSPs, you know, we internalize that. And then we say, oh, it was me, and I must have done something wrong. And instead of questioning the behavior on the outside of the others, we say, okay, it's going on in me, and I'll keep trying to change this. And we keep then focusing on over perfectionistic things, over giving, over explaining, over justifying, right? Over apologizing. Then this shows up in our relationships later on in life
Mhm.
as well. So your listeners who are also in partnerships where they feel like they over justify, over explain, etc., may have probably also had that original core wound from back at home as well.
Absolutely. There was one thing. I love everything that you've said, and I'm for those of you who are listening. This podcast is going to be recorded and put on my YouTube channel, so you can see Laurie and I talking and see all of my facial expressions and reactions as she's talking. Because I'm like, wow, yes, you hit the nail on the head. Like, this is resonating with me. Oh my goodness, like we are, totally like on that same vibe, and I see you and understand on such a deep level, like how you felt, what you went through, because I was like in the very very same mental state and thinking all of these things. But I
Yeah.
want to quickly just touch upon what you shared about relationships, because
Mm.
what I actually had like this was I mean, I've had several breakthroughs, and similar to you, about 4.5 years ago, when I hit my own personal rock bottom, that was when I started, my spiritual journey, my self-love journey, my self-identity journey, and doing things for me for the first time in my life. And it was
Mm.
incredible. And just, this, like, you feel so in sync with your higher self, and it's just this beautiful liberation, the freedom that you
Yeah.
get from that. um,
Right.
but
Yeah.
what I realized is that there was a thought that I had like a couple of days ago, and so I'm glad that we're talking about this now, because all these podcast episodes are like, therapy sessions in and of themselves, and I love them, and I'm so grateful. It's just wonderful. And I had this realization that there was someone that I was dating like 4.5 years ago, right before I had my personal like rock bottom, who, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, narcissist. Didn't
Mm.
realize, but it was the same kind of behavior, because what I realized is that I was trying so hard to like be perfect for my mom, as you said, like this
Yeah.
perfection, this people pleasing, which is something that I struggled with forever.
Yeah.
And I was always like, nice Lizzie, you can always, and it's like I didn't understand how to set boundaries with anyone in my life, because I didn't know how to set boundaries with the person who I needed to first initiate those boundaries with. But the breakthrough happened when I was like, oh my gosh. So I didn't realize that oftentimes I felt like she was jealous of me.
Oh,
I felt
yep.
like we were competing, and I
Yeah.
felt like there was this constant need to compete with her. So it goes into like with what you said
Mm.
about like the relationship, like the ancestral, like
Yeah.
weird relationship. Like, I thought I was in a relationship with my mom a lot of the time too, and
Yeah.
like that was even weirder for me. But
Yeah.
like there was always this like underlying feeling of like I have to compete. So I also felt like I was
Yeah.
pit against my brother. My brother's 4 years younger than
Yeah.
me. There was
Oh, you nailed it. Yeah.
competition is like the underlying thing. And I realized
Yes.
that this person that I dated, I felt like I was constantly needing to compete.
Mm.
And it was like, oh my God. So that's also why things didn't work out with other people, is because I was
Yeah.
finding my mom in other people. And it's like,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
it's crazy when like when you hear these things conceptually, you're like, oh, girls date their fathers, or boys date their moms, and it's like you hear these things as like concepts, but when it actually like when you break it down, you're like, okay, but what about your parents? Like that's just, like if you really
Yeah.
take that saying apart and you understand like, but what is it that you're seeking? What needs are you looking to fulfill? Like
Yeah.
why are you
Yeah.
attracting the same kind of person? And it's because I felt like I needed to prove myself. And so I thought
Yep.
the only way that I can be successful in a relationship is if I'm with someone that I can prove that I deserve to be in this relationship, or that I can prove myself to them. And I remember that I wrote a note to myself, and this is giving me chills because I didn't piece this together until just now. I
Oh,
wrote a note to myself when I made the decision to, sort of emotionally cut ties with how my mom made me feel. And I wrote, I'll know that I'm with the person that I'm meant to be when I feel like I don't have to prove myself to them, and like
yeah. Yeah.
finding that is the most beautiful thing. And it happened because I understood narcissism and understood my past, and
Yeah.
like I did these self-awareness exercises to free myself in order to grow and to then find healthy relationships with people in general. It doesn't have to just be romantic relationship, but just people in general. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to share that. There was something else that you mentioned, and I'm sure when I hear the playback, I'll be like, oh my gosh. But when you said relationships, I was like, I literally just thought about this. So I just
I
wanted
love
to
it.
share.
I love, yeah, and I love when you mentioned the piece about jealousy, because I think that's also really important for the listeners too. When you were asking about signs, symptoms, how do we know that we might be in something that's unhealthy? And that jealousy is a number one cue. And that feeling of this person is competing with me or comparing. And you get to this place of despair because they're in the place of compare. And it always feels like a win-lose. When we're in healthy relationships, it's all about collaboration and creation and expansion and transformation and wanting to see the other person grow and witness them in their highest self. Unfortunately, when we're in a relationship with disordered people, they want to see you operating at a much lower level, and they want to keep pulling you down to their level. Because if you're going above, you're up leveling, they're like, oh my gosh, I need you to come back down because I need you to stay. I need you to give me supply. And here's how you know that it's not working well is because you're always jealous, even though this is something that they're feeling inside. You always do this, even though this is something that they're doing, right? You never do this, even though they're the person who's never doing it or always doing it. And so these are very big signs. And if you're
Wow.
bringing them into relationships, or you end up in relationships where it's a win-lose, there isn't collaboration, there's constant compare, jealousy, and possession, you feel possessive of the other, or you're being possessed by the other, you're not in an expansive place. And here's the thing. It could be because you're seeking that approval because, we wanted it from mom, we wanted it from dad, we didn't felt we got it. So we need to be recognized, we need to be praised, and I'm going to show you how amazing I am. That's why you chose me in this relationship. But the reality of it is we are our own supply.
Mm.
We are our first home. We don't need to seek home and refuge in others. When you are your first home and you get into a positive relationship that's based on win-win and creation and collaboration, you get to come together with that other person who operates from themselves as their first home, and then create an even higher functioning, harmonious, happy, healthy, beautiful home. I recognized this also with my father. Constant competition.
Ooh.
And I would tell him all the time, you're my father, I'm your daughter, and I love you. And what is this competition thing? I don't get it. It doesn't resonate and it doesn't feel good. And he would just keep jabbing, and he would also give negative reinforcement when I thrive on positive reinforcement. That's something that he, of course, thrives on. Negative reinforcement, being the person that he is, and comparing, constant comparing, and constantly looking outside what everybody else is doing. Oh, what are they doing? What are they doing? We need to do that. And one-upmanship, always one-upping, and never taking accountability, never
Oh.
taking responsibility,
Oh.
very rarely saying, I'm sorry. They will say sorry. Now, I've watched a lot of vlogs. I've read a lot of blogs. I've done so much research on this subject, and people say they never say sorry. No, 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 no. They will. They know I need to say sorry to bring this person back. But what your listeners need to look for are the patterns, the behavior. Are they walking the talk? So when you say to them, hey, I have a concern, this behavior concerns me. I say it's an ongoing theme. And the person says, oh, I'm sorry. Now we need to watch. Are they actively trying to redesign an alliance with you and actively making change? If you see that they're honoring your non-negotiables, they are honoring your deal breaker, and they are looking at, okay, this is what this person needs for an honest, transparent, truthful relationship. I need to do that. And they do it. Great. They're not in a space of narcissism. But on the flip of that, if the behavior doesn't match the words, they are incongruent, then this is what we need to be looking for, because that's not going to change. Absolutely. And that's the part where we start to fill in the blanks in our dissociation. When we dissociate and we black out and we have that victim amnesia and they did all that blame shifting, it's like, oh, wait a minute here. Okay, I'm sorry. And you're the one saying sorry. You're taking all the accountability and all the responsibility. And they're like, yeah, it was your fault. It was your fault. Oof, we're in that win-lose situation, always on the losing side, not in a win-win. Yeah.
Right. And I think that piggybacking on all of this information, which is so incredible and transformative, what are there other clusters? I know that we were talking about like ABC. Is that the covert and are those, or is there something else? Because truthfully, that's actually something that I've heard, but I don't know too much about. So I'm sure that our listeners will also be grateful to hear a little bit more about, what are the clusters like A, B, and C?
So the cluster A, this is all your they classify it as odd or eccentric behaviors. So these are like your schizotypal, your schizoid, paranoid PPD, paranoid personality disorder. So oftentimes, you will see these people maybe being a bit more hermit-like. They might even forego hygiene. So very, very different than the cluster B. The cluster B, this is your dramatic or emotional side. So this is where you're going to find the histrionic, you're going to find the borderline, you're going to find the narcissist, the NPD. The C, that's a very interesting one. This is the anxious one. So this is oftentimes where the OCD pops up that you had mentioned earlier. So they actually fall into the cluster C. Now you can have OCD symptoms, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you have a typed personality disorder. But yeah, OCD, dependent personality disorder. The avoidant personality disorder falls into the cluster C personality. So you can feel and hear the very different personality types and the symptoms, if you will, that come with these disorders. And A, B, and C.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And now a question that I'm sure most of us are questioning and wanting to hear more about is, what is the best way for us to communicate with a narcissist, whether they're in cluster A, B, or C?
I know, right? Well, the narcissist is always in cluster B, but maybe there will definitely be different communication strategies for each cluster. So you're more than likely going to communicate with someone in cluster A very differently than with someone in B and C. But answering directly the question about a narcissist, I love to say, first tip is facts, facts, facts. What are the facts? Can you stick to the agenda? Can they stick to the agenda? Or are they giving you a lot of word salad? And the way that I would do it when I was growing up is I would say, this is the topic on the table. I'm not hearing us address the topic on the table. So really, if you're able to operate from this fact and evidence and proof-based place, this will help you. Because oftentimes also with narcissists, sometimes we end up having to go to court, especially spouses who are now going through a divorce and need to co-parent, and keeping a journal and keeping a dialogue, or a log with all of the dialogue that happened in a fact-based way. Dates, times, locations, even what you were wearing and what was said is really, really important if you ultimately have to use this in court. Now that's going one level. If you don't have to use it in court, just on a daily basis, sticking to the facts is something that's really important. The second thing is I call something the 3 Fs. This is something that if you use this with pretty much any disordered person, anybody actually, doesn't even have to be a disordered person. It's feel, felt, found, and starting with I understand how you feel, or it could be, I appreciate how you feel, or I get how you feel. That moment that you say, I get how you feel, especially a disordered person's like, oh, they feel me, they get me. Now, you do not have to agree with this person. This is just a disarming tactic so that they'll stop hopefully attacking you, hopefully stop that word salad a bit. And then the next thing is, I would have felt the same way. If I were in your shoes, maybe I would have felt the same way. So that's the second F. And at the same time, I found that when we focus on solution, that we can move forward. So I'm not going to say that it works all the time, but it's pretty effective. I've used it with quite a few narcissists, and sometimes I have to repeat those 3 Fs in different ways over and over and over again. But usually what happens is they suddenly realize that their word salad isn't working. They back off a bit, and you've regained control in essence over that conversation. The third thing, and I don't know, you may have already talked about this, is gray rocking. Gray rock is where you basically become as boring as you possibly can be in your physical appearance as well as in your communication style. So you use as less words as possible. So you say things like, that's interesting. Oh, didn't know that. I'll take that into consideration. I'll get back to you. And you don't want to do it in an antagonistic way, because then, of course, that's going to backfire on you. But the less that you say, then the less they can dizzy and spin you. And also, the more boring you are, even in physical appearance, that's not exciting for the narcissist. So they're like, hey, what's going on? This woman, for example, she's not putting makeup on anymore. She's not looking as beautiful as before. That, coupled with your gray rock phrases and verbiage back, goes, this person's not exciting. I'm not getting any energy from them. I can't gain supply. And ultimately, they start to walk away and they start to leave. I'm a big fan of gray rocking, even in emails, chats, telephone, letter writing, in person, in verbal communication as well. Video recording calls, absolutely the same. I think another thing that's really important when we talk about you being your first home, guided visualizations, you taking the time to see yourself from your highest self, from your future self, so that way you can pull your energy back into you while simultaneously anchoring into your body. So in coactive coaching, we talk about touchstones. So like, for example, if you're a gut-centered person, putting your hand there. So when you have these conversations with these people that are dysfunctional, toxic, etc., that you're actually continuously activating your soul space, your home space from within by touching, if it's your gut, if it's your heart, even while you're in conversation with that person, they won't even recognize that you're doing it. But the key is to get out of the head, because we do that. We get into this, oh gosh, over-analysis, I'm not doing things right. And so when we move down below, the neck down to the body, and we anchor in our touchstone, then we can be speaking from higher self to this person, rather than them owning our soul and draining, we're having a soul drain rather than a soul gain. So those would be my tips when dealing with the narcissist, or even the person who has borderline and histrionic.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Those are really great tips. And the last one I actually hadn't heard of. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and thank you for sharing that. I think that it's almost, I don't know if it's similar to or sort of like on the opposite side, but what I think is interesting is that what I have found to be helpful is stepping more into me, like into the, so instead of it being more like, let me make myself appear physically or sound boring, what's been helping to keep sort of an arm's length of distance away from my narcissist is just like owning who I am and being unapologetic about it. So one thing, for example, is, my mom's very against like tattoos and piercings. And when I, had that personal face down in the arena, as Brene Brown talks about, and like this moment of like, I just felt broken. When I started rebuilding myself and discovering my higher self, like, who am I really? Without the voice of my mom, who am I? What do I like? What do I not like? What do I want to do with my future? What do I not want to do? So I started asking myself these questions and seeking, like kind of following that gut feeling of like, just what feels good? What gives me peace and comfort and excitement? And so as I started asking myself these empowering questions instead of disempowering questions, that was when I started to feel like I had a self-identity instead of, this clone identity that a friend of mine had actually back in high school said to me, Lizzie, you're your mom's daughter. You're not her clone. And that like
Oh, great friend.
still, right to this day, still like resonates in me because I'm like, that's such a great point. And I, again, didn't see that. But my point is that through these reflections and self-awareness exercises and empowering questions that I asked myself, I started becoming so in love and obsessive, like my personal growth and just so in love with myself that I'm like, you know, I don't care what she thinks or says about me anymore. Like if she wants me to
Yeah.
be this perfect daughter in this way that she sees me, I'm going to get my piercings. I'm going to get my tattoos. Like I have, like mine are really small, but I have like 6 of them. They're like,
Yeah.
I have one on my back and one over here. And like I have, my cartilage pierced and 3 piercings. And that makes
Yeah.
me feel good. Like this is a way for
Yeah.
me to express my creativity. And I see it as like a
Yeah.
form of art. And when I first told her about like the first 2 of them, I think, and she went ballistic and this and that, I was like, I internalized this feeling of like, I am unapologetically me. And
Yeah.
so it's almost like the more I started acting and looking the way that I wanted to look and act, she's also, I think, starting to realize that she doesn't have the control or the power over me.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Yeah.
like similar to what you're saying about acting, in a way, but it's like, I think that our listeners can try both things, like I think that
Yeah.
acting boring and seeming like, and maybe like an empowering word could be like, don't supply your energy, like in a way that,
Yeah.
to your point, and I love how you keep saying that, is like they're trying to use you as a battery to recharge themselves. And it's like,
Yeah.
just take the batteries out. Like, just don't be their
Yeah.
battery anymore, And it's like, whatever that means, like, just don't supply what they need. And for me, what I found is that the more in alignment that I act with how I choose to act, and I'm disassociating with like her image of me, it's like, I think she's starting to just realize like, okay, well then this is just like how it's going to be. Like you've got these tattoos, you've got these piercings, and it's still hard, because I know we talked before we jumped on that I still have contact with her.
Yeah.
This is my way of like, also helping to give some insight for our listeners about like,
Yeah.
if you do feel like you're well enough on your like personal development journey that you feel like you've got the strength to be like, you know what, this is who I am, I'm unapologetic about it. I think that that's like a really empowering way to communicate with a narcissist. And I think that if someone is not quite there yet, it's okay. Like one thing that I learned about myself is to be patient
Yeah.
with myself
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to be very kind to myself as I'm learning and growing and discovering things about myself for the very first time. Even though I'm 29, it's like there are still things that I'm learning about myself,
Yeah.
and it's been 4 years, but it's like, it's beautiful. Every time I learn something new, I'm like, it gives me more reassurance and more of that, like the ball is back in my court. And then I know we've talked about this a little bit, but like boundary setting is another really great communication, is, being able to say, okay, I live states away, so that's also been very helpful, but it
Yeah.
had gotten to a point where there were so many check-ins and emails and like, or phone calls and like, where are you going? Who are you with? What are you doing? And it's like,
Oh, yes.
listen, I have a lot on my plate. Like there's a lot that I'm doing right now. I'm fine to talk, but like once a week or once every other week, like let's text. Like I
Mm.
think compromising is also, I mean, sometimes I recognize that some narcissists are either not capable of compromising or not willing to compromise.
Yeah.
It's taken a lot of me being strong in myself to get to this place with my mom. But I think what's been helping to, like mend our relationship is the fact that I'm being honest and unapologetic and setting boundaries and trying to find compromises. So like voice messages instead of
Yeah.
actual phone calls,
Yeah.
texting instead of, because sometimes we can talk for 2 hours and a lot of the time it's still condescending or like, let's talk about
Yeah.
religion and politics, two of the like topics that I absolutely don't like talking about because they're huge triggers for
Right.
me. So establishing that, like, but I think
Yeah.
again what's first and foremost most important is like you have to identify like what are your, as you said, like your non-negotiables, your
Yeah.
bottom lines. Like once
Yeah.
you identify those things and you call them out by name, then you can start to put up the guardrails and be like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to keep myself in my safe space even while we're talking, and sort
Yeah.
of give yourself that power that you have within you, and just learn how to use it and use it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you used a powerful phrase, which is really important about coping strategies. And I do want to underscore with respect to gray rock, it's a coping strategy and it's generally used with very dangerous narcissists.
Mm.
And it's usually used when people are in a relationship with a narcissist. So what oftentimes happens, especially with covert narcissists, they look like this gentle person, but they actually tend to be one of the most dangerous. They're kind of a ticking time bomb. And so those wives, generally speaking, it's not to say that husbands don't have wives that are covert narcissists, happen as well, but it is more often that a wife is in a relationship with a covert narcissist. They do have to be very, very careful to not endanger themselves. And so gray rock tends to be a coping strategy to make sure that they're in a place of safety. So I don't want to give your listeners the impression at all to not live from the space of truth and transparency and owning themselves and who they truly are and living from their soul power. I just want to be clear that the gray rock method is a coping strategy if you are especially in a highly inflamed type of arena. And you also hit the nail on the head about, there are different forms of contact to have with this narcissist. And it could be limited contact, very minimal contact. It's just like you said, maybe I only do emails and I don't, get on the phone with this person. I do say that the shorter the bursts, the better, because narcissists are looking, I call them interviewers, they're constantly interviewing you.
Ooh.
They're interviewing you, because they want to get this information. And the more that you talk, then the more I'm actually storing it all as a narcissist or as a borderline in my mind so that I can ultimately use it against you. Or I can, put forth that cognitive dissonance and get you questioning yourself or saying, remember when you said that to me? And then that's when they start to ding and jab you. So actually the less that you say, which is a little bit the gray rock method as well, the better, because they cannot arm themselves with all your empathic tendencies and then use it against you. So shorter bursts like you're doing is very good.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because if you think about each topic that you share with a narcissist, to your point that it's like you're giving them the questions to their interviews and they store it and they use it. It's like the image that came to mind just now is like, it's literally you giving this person like literal armor. Like every time you give them something, you're giving them a sword. You say something else, you're giving them the shield. You're saying something else, you're giving them a helmet with spikes. It's like, and they're going to keep it, and they will like learn, okay, well then how do I use this against you? And and I'm thank you for sharing about the gray rock.
Gray rock.
The gray rock. And that makes sense. And I think I picked up based on the method that it would be more suited for someone who is in a relationship with a narcissist as opposed to a parent. So I'm grateful for your knowledge and expertise in sharing that, because again, like our listeners might be a spouse of someone in a relationship with someone. It doesn't, of course it's not always just a parent or a family member. So yeah, I'm grateful that you shared that. And that makes total sense.
I want to say one thing, Lizzie, that you said about, you're handing them a toolkit basically of weaponry. And here's the thing, I think it's important for your listeners to know, because this is where it's seductive and spellbinding, is even though you're giving them all this information and it sounds like to the listener right now that they're going to come back and, and just like pummel you. No, they very well can come across like they're doing in a very charming, caring, engaging way, like they're coming from a space of concern. But again, example, I got flowers today because it's my birthday tomorrow. And when I didn't know, thank you. I didn't, and usually I actually don't tell people it's my birthday because I was raised in this environment of like, we don't, who cares? It was sabotaging the holidays. So I usually don't even bring it up. But for the purpose of this story, so the doorbell rings, I'm surprised. There's this beautiful bouquet of flowers. And then the lady leaves, grab the flowers, and I knew before I looked at the card, I knew who it was from. And instead of being like, oh my God, how sweet, how amazing, I was angry. I was irritated. I was so annoyed. I was like, this manipulative, blah, 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 And if you have this immediate trigger and this immediate feeling over something that is supposed to be good, something that is supposed to be nice, like a lovely gift, this is an indication of the charming and the manipulation that
Oh,
you're feeling innately inside. But you have this very opposite cognitive dissonant reaction. It's like, I should be feeling happy right now. Why am I feeling irritated and upset and annoyed? Then more than likely the person that you're associating with is not operating from the space of pure positive intention, as
wow.
in the case with the person I received the flowers from today. Yeah.
That is so deep. And if I may, like add something that just came to mind as well. Are you familiar with the 5 love languages?
Yes.
One of them
Yes.
is gift giving. And it's
For
funny.
you?
No, not
Yes, yes. The
just
gift
in
giving.
general.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what's funny is that my like number 5 is gift giving because
Yeah.
I always received gifts from my
Mm-hmm.
mom, but then it would be followed by, well, because I bought you something, I didn't buy myself something, so you're welcome. Or I bought you this
Oh,
because this is
yes.
what I think that you should, wear, or how, and it was this constant, like, look at how much I love you. I'm buying you all these things.
Yep.
But I never felt like it was coming from this like genuine place. I'm like, but I didn't even want this. Well, you're
Yeah.
so ungrateful. How could you not
Yeah.
want this? Like maybe you don't know that you want it yet. I know before you know. So I'm
Yeah.
telling you that you need this. And it's like, no, pretty sure I didn't need or want this,
Yeah.
but and then again, so that's the spiral. But my point is that when you said like that you had this reaction when you received a gift, my top 2, which I'm sure not a surprise as a highly sensitive empath, but like words of affirmation is my number 1 and physical touch is my number 2. And my mom does not do words of
Mm,
affirmation or physical
no.
touch. So she
No.
and I on a literal, like we did not speak the same language. And
Yeah.
if her, version of love language is gift giving, and that's my number 5 because I
Yeah.
don't, for me, like, is it nice to receive a gift from anyone? It doesn't even just have to be from her. Yeah, of course. Like it's nice to receive gifts. However, I do not feel unconditionally supported and loved when I receive a gift because I have this, you know,
Yeah.
PTSD that if I receive a gift, it means I owe you something back or that
Right.
there's something coming back around.
Right.
There's always like a hidden agenda. So I'm like,
Yes.
I'd rather hear I'm supporting you. I
Yeah.
believe in you. You're
Mm-hmm.
incredible. You got this. You're amazing. You're unstoppable. My dad is that's one of his love languages is he's a words of affirmation and physical touch, but
Mm-hmm.
because going back to that competition, my mom also pit me against my dad.
Yes. I'm
There
so
was
glad
this
you brought that back up. That's important.
constant.
This triangulation
Oh my
that
God.
it's going.
And against my family, by the way. I grew
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
not loving my
Yeah. Yeah.
family, not even wanting to talk to them. I kept myself
Yep.
so disconnected from them because, well, did you know that so and so did this to me and this
Yep.
person did this to me? And it was always like, but I've got you and you've got me and no one else matters.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
constant. So I was pit against my dad. I was pit against my
Yep.
family, and I
And this is on
hated my dad.
purpose. This is
Yeah.
very, yeah. This is on purpose. All that triangulation can be verbal, like she did with the rumor spreading, the gossiping, the pointing
Oh,
fingers, the backstabbing. And we should, as human beings, be like, if this person's saying all of this crap about other people, like, what do they say about me when I'm not around? Because they do, by the way, they absolutely do.
mm,
And like you said, the gift giving, laced with agenda, it's
oh.
conditional. It is not unconditional. And that's why, yeah, especially for HSPs and empaths or people just, people that are not disordered, like, how come this gift doesn't feel good? Because there's something
Oh.
on the other side of it. And again, it's that aggrandizement. It's like, I'm putting myself on a pedestal. Look how amazing and noble I am. I got you this gift. I thought about something that you didn't even think about for yourself. But you hit the nail on the head when we're not speaking the same love language and we're not even recognizing it in the other person, constantly missing the mark. It doesn't matter how many times you speak up with someone who's disordered like this. Like, actually,
Mhm.
hey, whoa, this is not my love language. They're super not listening. They don't want to listen. They don't care because it is all about them. It really is. At the end of the day,
Yep.
it's just like, this is where I operate from. This is the space I operate from. And you're either going to get on this program or you're not. Something that happened with, my mom I always called her a duty mom. Like,
Mm.
she was not affectionate, but she made sure all the meals were, prepared and so on, sat down with me at homework, for homework, made sure it was correct. But at the end of the day, I was starving emotionally. And I would be like, hey mom, like, you don't kiss me, you don't hug me, you don't say I love you, you don't say I miss you. And it was just like flat, zero, nada. And I was like, okay. And I always had inside this sort of secret feeling that if I said or did anything wrong, and it wasn't because she told me this directly, but it was an energetic thing that she was sending out. that if I said or did anything wrong, she would cut me off and never speak to me again. I just had this intuitive, inherent feeling, and I didn't know from where it came.
Mm.
And here we are now. We are not in contact. And I swear inside, I feel deep down inside, she doesn't care. Like, it's totally fine that she will never see her daughter again, which sort of blows my mind. But I also go, well, this is the space that she operates from. And yeah, and I was so busy working on myself to try to be even more perfect or better, or like go, hey, mom, did I do this right? Like, is this cool? Do I have this down yet? So you don't ever go away. I was so busy on that in the end, it still didn't matter because we are estranged. And at the end of the day, my journey with self-help and self-love started when I was 18, and I went to university and went to a therapist for the first time. It didn't end there, obviously, but there was something obviously calling out in me that, hey, something doesn't feel right at home. I always called it the house of secrets, and I didn't know why. I couldn't put my finger on it. But
Wow.
now, years later, after all of this reading and all of this understanding and study, it's like, oh, that's why. And that's why it's important to make yourself your first home.
Absolutely. That's so
Yeah.
beautiful. This is like, I feel like we could keep talking for hours and hours, and I absolutely love everything that we're sharing. And it's great that even like the question about what is it like having a narc parent or a family member or partner, we like covered that as well. So that's great.
Yeah.
So I always love to, end the soul chats, giving our audience and our listeners a practical tool, or something that they can start implementing today, and also just empowering them with comfort. So as I know we've kind of touched a little bit on some of these things, but what are some ways that we can help ourselves and show ourselves love today?
Yeah.
Just to start, like, let's say that we've gone through this whole conversation, we've identified who this person is in our lives, and now we're like, okay, so we know how to communicate with them, but how can I give myself love and support?
Yeah. I would start with writing out your non-negotiables and your deal breakers and
Mm.
being very, very clear. You write out your definition of a happy, healthy, harmonious relationship, and write down all of your values that are incorporated into that definition. So deal breakers, non-negotiables, definition of a happy, healthy, harmonious relationship, then check all of your relationships against these three things. How are they doing? Are they in alignment? If there isn't alignment, going to those people and saying, hey, these are my non-negotiables. These are my deal breakers. I see that, seems like deal breaker A is being broken. How can we fix this? If you feel that they are genuinely interested in getting to solution on board with you, great. Keep on going, keep on trucking. If you feel like, whoa, big time resistance, you might want to ask, can we redesign this alliance? And if so, how? However, if they're not going to meet you, then this is probably a relationship that needs to be released. You can love them from afar. You can bless them from afar. Nobody said they needed to physically be in your space. I love and bless my family every single day. I want them to be happy and healthy. We're not in relationship, and that's totally okay in terms of us not being physically in contact, and zero contact, by the way, not even email, chat, etc. But that doesn't mean that I wish for them to be ill or not well. So that's something that your listeners can know. You can love and bless and spiritually wish them well from afar. The other thing I would say, and I'll leave you with this, is that a lot of your listeners are probably journaling. We talked about journaling today in our session here in this podcast, to journal from different voices. So if you want to journal from the space of inner wounded child, to be like, okay, I identify this. This is what happened. I recognize it. But then please follow up with journaling from your higher self, that space of love and wisdom, the space that is expansive, the space that's in alignment and on purpose from your soul, and write notes to and from your higher self. Or you can even write letters from your future self, the self that you see yourself being, at your highest, most positive self 3 years from now, 5 years now, and writing back to yourself, doing that in your journal and revisiting those journal entries, reading them out loud, read them out loud in the mirror, share it with someone that you trust, so that way they can hold you accountable from operating from this space.
That's beautiful. I love the three voices. That really made my whole physiology just I almost felt myself relaxing, and that's such a beautiful visualization, and to be able to send yourself these love notes. I've been using the Notes app ever since my first big powerful
Yeah.
breakthrough, and although they're not written as letters, they're still so much like raw emotion. And I
Yeah.
think that without knowing it, they've also been sort of in three different voices, but they're all kind of meshed into
No.
one. So I think that, for those of our listeners who might be suffering from OCD, and maybe, if it helps you to kind of compartmentalize, because I know this is something that I struggle with, is having so many thoughts. I look at my
Yeah.
brain like a computer tab, like an internet browser with all the tabs
Yeah.
open. So I'm like, to help myself close them out, it's like, to organize
Mm.
it in the three voices and say, okay, these are the notes that I'm going to leave to myself
Yeah.
as my wounded child. This is the notes, and just so that way you can also
Yeah.
refer back to like very specific things depending on how it is that you're feeling, and use your own letters as comfort for when you're feeling like
Yes.
you're anxious or sad, or feeling those moments of self-doubt, because they still surface. But going through these different things that we've been talking about through this episode have really helped me, and I can say that I'm like so much more evolved, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything, from where I was 4.5 years ago. That
Yeah.
you know I just also want to share and really let our listeners like know that, you're if you've had these thoughts, you're not alone. If you
Yeah.
relate to Laurie's story, to my story, we understand you, we see you, we feel you, we hear you. We're here to support you, and all of this brokenness is possible to heal, to
Mm.
recover.
Yes.
And the self identity is, your higher self is waiting to meet you. Go and give her a hug, show her love. She just wants to love you. Like, I
Yeah.
see my higher self is like this beautiful
Mm.
hippie child with like beautiful like long curly hair and flowers. And I when I let her out of the closet and I was like, girl, come on, like, you've been crying in there and I want to give you a hug and just
Oh.
be there with you,
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
is the most incredible gift that you can give to yourself. So yes to
Mm.
all that you said, and to our listeners, like, give yourself a hug.
Yeah.
Especially
I
now,
love this.
for
Yes.
those who have physical touch as their love,
Yeah.
self love language.
Mm.
Just give yourself a hug, give yourself a massage. There's so many things that like we can buy on Amazon to like give ourselves the love that
Yes.
we are craving. So be your own battery.
Yeah, for sure. And I love how visual you are. I love the internet compartmentalizing the tabs. This is because guided visualization is also something to really anchor and
Mhm.
seal that in and see you in that higher self, as well as to calm down the adrenaline and the trauma
Mhm.
responses that we were raised with. So that coupled with all of the other things that we mentioned, including that anchoring, that body work, that somatic work, because
Mhm.
disordered people get us into our heads and out of our intuition space. So the guided visualizations, like you seeing all of those things, I love this. It just prompted me to say, yeah, I hope your listeners do that too. That's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lori, this was such an honor. I'm so grateful. This is such a beautiful
Thank you.
conversation. To my found family, I want to encourage you to go and show Lori all of your support and love. She is on Twitter. I know you have a website. What other social media platforms can you share with our?
Yeah. I should probably also spell my name because I spell it Laurie. So yeah, you can find me at Life Coach Laurie, Laurie at Insta. And on Twitter, I'm getting that handle because somebody else has that handle. So next week I should have Life Coach Laurie as
Okay,
well.
great. Well, this will
Yeah,
go live next week, so perfect.
yeah. But Insta is a perfect place to find me at Instagram at Life Coach Laurie.
Wonderful. And to my
Thank
found
you.
family, yes, of course, all of Lori's links will be in the description of this YouTube video and of this podcast episode. So please go and share Lori. Go show Lori support. I'm so grateful for you. This has truly been like so wonderful, and I'm feeling so great. It's like, go tackle the day and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. So I hope that our listeners are
Woo!
feeling the same way. I'm sure that they are. And yeah, thank you again so much.